Really? Bomb China, blockade China, nuke China. Okay, he wants World War III, yeah. What? Yeah. Happy New Year to you, too. Yeah. See you in 1951. December 31st, 1950. Old Iron Tits. What, you ask? That's you. You've just been given the toughest job in the entire U.S. Army. Your subordinates are mostly in total disarray, and the forces you now command are one step from catastrophe. Yet, you have a spring in your step and a determined eye, because you are Old Iron Tits. You are Matthew Ridgway. I'm Indy Neidell, and this is the Korean War. Last week, the UN forces got into their defensive lines to meet a future Chinese push. U.S. 10th Corps finished evacuating North Korea, and 8th Army Commander Walton Walker shuffled off this mortal coil after a Jeep crash. His replacement does not waste any time getting down to business. Matt Ridgway arrives in Korea this week, the 26th, and the UN forces hope for a change of fortune in the war. But one big thing has changed already by then. Ridgway meets with UN Forces Commander Douglas MacArthur Christmas Day for a briefing. And Mac tells Ridgway, "The 8th Army is yours, Matt. Do what you think best." And just like that, the war is no longer being fought from Tokyo. Ridgway is unique among American generals, not being part of any particular clique, but commanding respect from everybody. He has not been on MacArthur's side against the Joint Chiefs, nor on the Joint Chiefs' side against MacArthur. Rather, Ridgway is on Ridgway's side, and things are about to change in how the Americans run the Korean War. He tours the front lines the rest of the week and is shocked at the state of his forces, in particular the abysmal levels of recon and intelligence and how it is being applied. No real effort is made to maintain contact with the enemy, even now as the Chinese and North Korean forces are regrouping to attack. Okay, a much-feared Chinese Christmas offensive does not go off this week, so Ridgway has a few days to work with. But the UN forces are running out of time to avoid another series of humiliating defeats. Every headquarters he visits has a map of the local area, with little red flags all around the division's location. Each of the flags is supposed to represent a Chinese unit. Ridgway quizzes his officers about these flags. When was contact with these units made? What Chinese unit is it supposed to be? Is it division-sized or smaller? Is it holding or pushing forward? The officers he asks don't know. It transpires that after contact with the enemy has been made, the American troops mostly try to avoid that area and keep their distance. Ridgway is flabbergasted. He starts tearing flags from one of the maps and orders that unless contact has been made within the past 48 hours, no report is to be considered current. Aggressive and constant recon is mandatory, period. He also discovers that intelligence personnel have no idea about the terrain features of their front. They are clueless about the names or sources of nearby rivers or where roads and trails lead. To Ridgway, this level of ignorance is insane. Units are only concerned with their escape routes and their next withdrawal position. Now, when I say this, by the way, I'm not just talking about platoons and companies. This is not a few beaten down soldiers. This is going on at divisional and even corps level command. Basil Coad, commander of the British 27th Commonwealth Brigade, describes the state of 9th Corps headquarters at Uijiangbu. Complete lack of control or planning. Continually, we were given jobs that other people were already doing, or 3 or 4 tasks at once which were contradictory and could not possibly be done. Morale at the headquarters was appalling. The axis was universally called the escape route, and complete evacuation by sea was openly talked about. When Coad meets Ridgway for the first time the 28th, he finds him a breath of fresh air, as do many others. In a way, the current disposition of 8th Army is an ideal situation for Ridgway to stamp his authority on his new command. Anywhere he goes, there are problems to be addressed, and there is no shortage of situations for him to remedy, and he is everywhere. He turns up at briefings unexpectedly, goes out on patrol with the rank and file, appears from nowhere in his personal plane, checking up with individual companies or even platoons. His hand is now on the tiller, and he wants everyone to know it. On one particular occasion, Ridgway visits U.S. First Corps and sits in on an intelligence briefing with Corps G3 John Jeter. Ridgway promptly made his displeasure with the Corps known. During the briefing, Jeter went through a list of fallback positions. Ridgway asked what his attack plans were. Jeter answered that there were no attack plans. The next thing anyone knew, Jeter was gone, and word of it spread throughout the entire 8th Army. It was probably not fair relieving Jeter instead of Milburn, but nothing in Korea was fair then. Soon, 3 division commanders were on their way home. They would be praised for what they had done, given medals and honorable new jobs, but the 8th Army was not going to retreat anymore. It's probably fair to say that Ridgway won't be taking any nonsense from the men below him, but he won't suffer the stupidity of those above him either. Ridgway is not afraid of MacArthur, for example, and will stand his ground if necessary. Korea is his show. What is MacArthur up to after all this? Well, he's taken on the role of doomsday prophet. At the end of last week, we saw him submit a list of targets to Washington that he wants to hit with atomic bombs. This is not the only frenzied cable he sends to Washington. On the 29th, another message comes out of his Tokyo headquarters. MacArthur sent a message to the Joint Chiefs, as he had before, that he desired permission to blockade the China coast and attack airfields in Manchuria. He stated he did not fear the Chinese would be provoked. MacArthur considered the United States already at war with China. He also stated that if his wishes were not granted, the Korean peninsula should be evacuated. Summed up, Douglas MacArthur held that the U.S. should attempt to win, and win big, or get out. One thing MacArthur keeps mentioning is the prospect of allowing Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist Chinese to join the fight. Maybe here in Korea, maybe instead in China itself. MacArthur has repeatedly suggested that the U.S. should unleash Chiang and facilitate a landing of his troops into southern China and reignite the civil war there. Why exactly he believes this will work is another of life's great mysteries. The communist Chinese are not committing their full strength in Korea, not even close. So for any second front on the Chinese mainland to succeed, it would require huge amounts of U.S. support, and the kind of support where hundreds of thousands of American boots touch the ground, not just a sort of Lend-Lease sequel. Invariably then, we come back to the same issue as with any increased U.S. presence in Korea itself. The divisions to do things like this just do not exist. The discussions of the British visit earlier this month also seem to have had some effect on Washington, and people there are finally beginning to see Mao's China as its own entity, distinct from Stalin and the USSR. Because of this, they're also starting to become more firmly entrenched in their opinions that they're fighting the wrong war. If there is to be a hot war for the future of the world, then that clash will come in Europe. So MacArthur's requests are quietly rejected. The Joint Chiefs inform him that the stakes in Korea are already higher than they ought to be, and there is no appetite for a wider war with China, or any willingness to give the Soviets further reasons to get involved themselves. The new line from Washington is clear. This is the wrong war at the wrong time. If the communists do commit so many resources and men to Korea that the UN forces can't hold the South, then they're welcome to it. No total war mobilization is coming, and the UN forces are likely to be outnumbered by their adversaries from now until the end of the war. The new strategy, to put it crudely, is to kill so many Chinese in the field that the communists are forced to accept a return to pre-war borders and conditions. This is much to the dismay of Douglas MacArthur. The last month or so has hurt, to put it mildly, and he's still seeking some kind of big game-changing operation to turn the tables once again. At this point, it's becoming more of a personal struggle for him than a war. This is now just as much about his legacy as it is victory in Korea. What he's basically being told, though, is that there will be no further opportunities to redeem himself. And he is not happy about that. Well, in terms of action, the war is mostly quiet for the first half of the week. Okay, the South Korean forces, the ROK, have been reorganized a lot following their mauling up in the north. As the UN forces consolidate their position on Line B, the defensive line north of Seoul, the ROK hold the center and eastern sectors. U.S. 1st and 9th Corps are defending Seoul itself, while the newly committed ROK 3rd Corps is in the center of the peninsula. To their right is the ROK 2nd Corps, and on the east coast is the ROK 1st Corps. As well as the Chinese forces bearing down on Seoul, 8th Army G2 James Tarkington has identified 3 North Korean, KPA, corps on the front lines, and he believes a 4th is approaching. This adds up to some 65,000 KPA troops to go along with the estimated 175,000 Chinese that make up the Chinese PVA 13th Army Group. The cold in the north of Korea and the logistical challenges between the Yalu River and the front line obviously continue to take their toll on the Chinese forces moving south. The further south they go, the longer those shaky supply lines get, and the more precarious their situation becomes. While we wish to continue to push the enemy, we could not open our mouth too wide, said Hu Seng of Marshal Peng's staff. China was unprepared for the new military situation created by the deep advance. We were now in a position where we could not continue to reinforce our army in Korea because we could not supply more men. Chinese troops were able to get their hands on American rations and supplies in places like Pyongyang during 8th Army's withdrawal. But since then, things have been going from bad to worse. Frostbite and hunger are now the gravest threats to the Chinese, who find themselves in a situation very similar to that of the UN forces back in November. Land the killing blow soon, because it's a long walk back up the peninsula. The Chinese do not launch that killing blow just yet, though. It's actually the North Koreans who now test UN defenses. 2 regiments from KPA 5th Corps moved south from the Hwachon Reservoir early this week against ROK 8th Division, who give up nearly 2 kilometers of territory before containing the attack. Around the same time, a larger attack to the east pushes out from around India. This quite easily pushes through the strung-out ROK 9th Division, and by the 30th has managed to reach Route 29, a key road south from Chuncheon. They block this road roughly halfway between Chuncheon and Wonju. If this can be properly exploited, supply and communication for the eastern half of 8th Army could be thrown into chaos. This is not news Ridgway wants his first few days on the job, but he reacts quickly. On the 27th, the French battalion is attached to the 23rd Infantry, and the 2 move north to Wonju. When it becomes apparent that the KPA have reached Route 29, the remainder of U.S. 2nd Division is moved north too. By today, the 31st, a combined attack from 2nd Division to the south and elements of ROK 3rd Division to the north have mostly cleared out the KPA roadblock. Even so, the penetration is deeper than anyone would really like, and Ridgway really needs Ned Almond's 10th Corps to safeguard his right flank. 10th Corps does finish fully relocating to the south this week on the 30th, but its divisions are still refurbishing and replenishing, and they will not be able to move north for another week at least. Ridgway issues orders to Almond to hurry up, and says that if the entire Corps can't be ready to move, then get 1 division ready to move ASAP, and get up to Wonju with it. From there, Almond will have 2nd Division and possibly an ROK division temporarily assigned to him as well. And as darkness falls today, the Chinese begin moving, crossing the Imjin and driving south towards Seoul as the final hours of 1950 tick away. And we shall see the results of this thrust when 1951 begins, because this week is over. Ridgway has spent his first days in Korea and has certainly not been idle. MacArthur continues to stew over circumstances, and the Chinese and North Koreans have entered the south and begun new operations. And 1950 comes to an end. Any talk of home by Christmas by the UN forces has long since gone quiet, and Christmas has come and gone with little fanfare. And instead they wonder, on both sides they wonder, when will they actually be home? Many Western soldiers don't know what they're really fighting for, and the Chinese volunteers aren't quite sure either. But their job is not to understand, is it? It's to face each other and to kill each other, all pawns in a larger game, hot opening moves of the larger Cold War. Talk of third world wars and atom bombs only adds to the absurdity of the situation. How many lives on both sides need to be snuffed out before their time to satisfy Mao Zedong, Kim Il-sung, Syngman Rhee, Douglas MacArthur, and Harry Truman? I don't have the answer to that. The only thing I do know for certain is that this war will continue into 1951, and that list of sacrifices will only grow. Happy New Year.